action is having car trouble. So she will hopefully.
I'm not hearing through her microphone.
We'll see if she gets here in time to do that portion first as planned, or we might have to switch the order around. I'm not quite sure about that yet. They're in the foyer area. Also, afterwards, there's a trash can set on the door, so if you help take care of your trash, that would be great. Minimize people later, or all of us if you help us with that.
Michael, can you hear okay?
Barely. I hear you much better. So your mic is live and hers is not.
Is that better?
I've got my volume cranked up.
I suggest you do this now, and you can deposit those papers into the basket, and our subcommittee will, after this meeting, we're having another meeting on the subcommittee, and we will look at what those notes, questions, and concerns are to help us determine our direction tomorrow's meeting.
Is that better?
Today's meeting is primarily an information gathering meeting to discuss implications of becoming a sanctuary for immigrants. The discussion tomorrow will take place about the things that we learned today, and a decision then will be made at a later date as to whether or not we will be becoming a sanctuary. The agenda for today is to have 20 to 30 minutes of time to focus on these questions with Lupe. Why and when is sanctuary a needed option? What does a church need to do to prepare for a person seeking sanctuary? And then there'll be a chance for you to direct questions to her as well, so that Michael can see. It would be best if you came up to the microphone here. If you prefer to stay seated, we can bring a mic to you as well. After those questions or that discussion is over, then we'll have 20 or 30 minutes in which we will be addressing the questions to Michael. What are the legal implications for a church providing sanctuary? Again, questions can be directed to him, and the meeting will dismiss you, and we will then have conversation tomorrow at 1 o'clock to determine the direction we want to go. So Lupe has provided us with a form that gives details about how sanctuary came about. It's a 10-page document. It's not something we would like all of you to take home. In fact, it looks like they're already all on. So we just thought we would make 10 copies of it so that people can look at it during the day-to-day. And if you want, we can send you an email or a document over the internet so that you can see that. I don't know if you've gotten that would be made available to you as well. As needed, or you can read a copy here today and place it back on the table for others. Right. So we are recording this meeting, and it will be shown at 9 o'clock tomorrow here in the sanctuary again. For anybody that's missed this meeting, so if you know somebody that wants to see, you can tell them that they can come tomorrow to watch it again. And then at some point later in the week, it will be available for you to watch on the internet and stuff. But that won't be able to happen until later. Right, I think at this time I'm going to turn it over to Debbie. I just want to give a bit of an introduction to the two people that we'll be hearing from. We are fortunate to have people willing to us think through and live into, hopefully, what a commitment to sanctuary is for us and also for those who enter into sanctuary. It gives us a taste of what decisions face our undocumented friends. And it gives us an opportunity to walk a bit of that journey as a community. We are grateful to Michael Lupe for helping us out today. This morning, Magdaleno from Sunflower Community Action from Wichita, where she is executive director. I want to speak either first or second. She was here some weeks ago to give some information and encouragement, and she's here. And we are happy to have her here again. Some of you, like me, will be surprised to learn that Sunflower Community Action is a national organization.
Lupe just got here, so she'll go first.
It is a national institution. He has also met with MCC to talk to them about immigration, so she is getting around in a nice circle. I'm going to read what is on the webpage. Lupe has a passion for justice and believes that each human being has rights given by God. She believes that all laws should be respected. She has developed this belief throughout her life. While Lupe is from South America, she immigrated to the United States at the age of 18 with her husband and 2-year-old daughter, looking for a better future for her family. Lupe has a history of working with Sunflower Community Action and was instrumental in assisting us getting involved as the move the statute of limitations on rape. Our other speaker this morning is going to be through Zoom, and that is Michael. And I honestly don't know if Michael, you use Sharma-Crawford or just Crawford.
No, Sharma-Crawford.
Okay. And he is from a law firm, Sharma-Crawford immigration firm in Kansas City. And we come to know about Michael and his wife through Shalom. So we're going to, because of the here, we'll go ahead and if you need a cup of coffee or you need a cigarette or you're good? Okay. All right. We'll just go straight to her. Can I get you a cup of coffee or something? Okay.
Yes, I am. Oh. Yeah, I am.
Please go. Can everybody hear me fine, or I need Okay. Well, good morning. Thank you very much for taking the time to be here with us on Saturday. That really means a lot to me. And I'm here today to talk about sanctuary and the implications and why sanctuary on this side are needed once again.
Are you hearing Lupe?
One of them about this screen. This document was put together about 3-4 years ago. I was talking to Pastor Rachel yesterday, and I was explaining to her at that time, I had this urge to work in a community protection network, and everybody was looking at me, including some attorneys, like, we're crazy, that is not even needed or possible. And that changed. We were able to get all the system in place, but people were still like, well, we're not there yet. We don't need that. It's not necessary. We can just help as needed with food and other basic needs when a family is in distress. But that changed pretty much on 2017. We have been seeing that new harsh enforcement of a broken immigration system that is pushing our community and immigrant communities into the shadows, into a life of fear. And not only the Latino immigrants, I am talking about refugees and asylum beneficiaries. And sanctuary is a piece of the puzzle that we envision as a community to be able to protect one another. And this takes us back a little bit about it takes a village to raise a child, where we are all responsible for the well-being of each other. And the document that I had I put it together several years ago. I reviewed it last night, and I didn't do any changes because I think it's just right on point today. I like to bring it up. Did you print it?
No, but it's right there. If you just
Okay.
hit this button and just randomly point, it'll change.
Okay, so this document is long, but I think, okay, so this is about the protection network. So the purpose of the community coming together,
Today I see it as a puzzle. Everybody has a role. So the purpose of this community
network is to support
and empower
each other. And I am going to be, so as you can see over here on the network,
there is
a
committee.
I
I was
was
talking
talking
to
to
Pastor
Rachel last night, and when we first started it, we envisioned that each community group had members of
members of the community.
And last night we were talking about the urgency and the magnitude of the new way of living in the community. We were talking about the possibility that a church can be one of those. So it's more means a person coordinating. To say if Shalom decides to become a sanctuary church, then the sanctuary committee will be the role that will be fulfilled by Shalom. And let's say that Universalist UU Church decides to be the one that is going to be in charge of making sure that a family in distress gets the immediate needs covered. Then they will be the one that will be with the emergency support committee. And let's say that the good pastor church from Wichita decides to be the one that is going to be running the good moral support committee. So that church will be coordinating that. And I will go in details a little bit more on each committee for the ones that have not seen the presentation before. But that is a suggestion that probably as a church you can address deeper with our pastor. But that is the only group that won't be like a church. It will be our people directly affected. So that is the group that Sunflower is more involved with. So they come to Sunflower when they are in need. We want them to start coming before they are in an urgent need of support, where we can train them to prepare themselves. We have talked a little bit about preparing packets that will allow, I see it as their life record or history, where they can have all the documentation that an attorney will need to fight a case. And I'm talking about time. We are seeing an increment of the cases being processed to expedite removal. So there is absolutely no time for the family to go to an attorney, to find the letters, search for the birth certificates and everything else that needs to be given to an attorney so they can start a case. So our goal is to help the immigrant families to be prepared, to have those packets together with birth certificates translated, documents notarized, legal custody documents in place, power of attorneys in place, that they can have an emergency plan of action, who their attorney is going to be, who needs to be communicated immediately when something happens with their life. If they get stopped and taken by the police and ICE gets a hold of their case and tell the police do not release them, I want them in custody, then that phone call of the member of the community is going to be to say, I'm in police, but I'm going to be in custody. With immigration, turn on the emergency plan. So that person knows who needs to be called, who has the packet, who the attorney is, and this will allow an attorney to put a good fight in a timely manner. That doesn't mean that the cases are going to be successful. That would all depend on each individual case, but that gives the family the best chance to fight for, to stay together in this country. So, Rachel, I would like the document that talks about sanctuary.
Okay. I don't know how that, I have to give that certainly to you all agree.
If possible, if not, if they have it there. Okay, so the ones that have this document, as you can see on this one, there is 8 pieces. And I was asked today to address the sanctuary part of it. It's my understanding that Shalom has been thinking about become the first sanctuary church. And let me tell you, I was researching last night, and there is not a sanctuary church in the state of Kansas. And so if Shalom decides to do it, it's going to be the first church in the state of Kansas. There is already about 15 states that have sanctuary churches. They're doing it pretty much on their own. It's not as organized as we have this project here. We have already in Wichita a few community members that have signed up for the different committees. We have families that have come to us, and I already got a couple of scares. And I reached out to Pastor Rachel. One family in particular was a mother of 4 kids, single mother, and she got detained for a traffic infraction. Of course, if you don't have a working light in your car and you get detained and then you get asked for your driver license, then the officer realizes that you don't have it. They have the freedom and the criteria to give you a ticket or to take you. When it's not the first time, more than likely you are going to be taken, and the normal process is that you will be released and you have to appear in court. But for an undocumented immigrant, it's not that easy. If they don't get released, then they get placed in custody. So this family, the mom had already more than 1 stops for driving without driver license, and now they're criminalizing those minor infractions to a point that they get arrested. So she got arrested. The family was freaking out. They didn't know if she was taken by ICE or the police. There was no witness. Nobody was there. So all they knew is that she was taken. And she communicated with them who were trying to figure out what happened. But even that child services was knocking at the door. The oldest children was, I believe it was 12. So it was small children. So they were knocking at the door. So one of the older children was there and Luke, and they were smart enough not to open the door. So the sister-in-law came to us because she said the child services get a hold of the kids, then the mother gets deported and we lost the kids because she's a single mother. So we were talking to Shalom to see if we could, we had an attorney that was going to work in getting that mother out on a bond. And if we would have been in need of hiding or giving sanctuary to the children until that little decision was made, we have a chance of winning this case. And all of these, an attorney will be looking into the legal process and steps on each individual case to let us know if a case has a chance to make a case to the judge, appeal to the judge. If it's a case that do not have anything that either the public eye or the judge can say, no, absolutely not, she's going to be deported. So being prepared on that case, if the sister-in-law would have been with Sunflower and had the legal custody of the kids' documentation ready, she would have been able to come out and get the kids and protect them and say, have legal custody without many more implications to it. Mom would have been more at peace knowing that her kids were safe. So I was calling Shalom, if we are able to get this mom out on a bond, can you become a sanctuary church so we can fight this deportation and also protect the kids so they don't go into the system? I believe that our system has a good intentions, our children protection system has good intentions, but like any other justice system, there is flaws. And sometimes when the children become part of that system, it's like getting a mark. It's very difficult to get them out, and the trauma that they go through is never erased. We can fix a paper file, but not our memories. So being prepared is imperative. Now, addressing more the sanctuary issues, I'm gonna, it's a word, yes. So the sanctuary is, I was asked about the roots of the sanctuary. So it's one of the most ancient traditions that has been mainly done by people of faith, like us here today. And it was done to provide refuge in the 1980s to refugees fleeing the violence of the South countries like El Salvador, Honduras. And it was awakened about 4 years ago when we start seeing that the deportation of the immigrant families with no criminal records per se. We can go deeper into details what is a criminal record. Now these days I feel that the private prison industries are so popular in wanting to make profits that maybe running a stop sign can be called a crime instead of an infraction. But they were awakened in 2014 when we start noticing that more and more families were breaking apart for infractions, not actual crimes. And again, there is people out there that can debate what a crime is. Like I mentioned, they were on the 1980s. And at this point, you see over there, more than 500 congregations were involved at those times. On the present time, there is many states with one or more churches being a sanctuary church. If you can go a little bit more to the next bullet. I don't want to read the whole document, just kind of highlight a little bit of the, okay, so that is the why now. In the past several years, we have prayed and organized and get Congress to pass immigration reform. And after 3 years of hoping, it is clear that our leaders have failed to address the situation of the 11 million undocumented people living in the US. But just because Congress has failed to act does not mean that people of faith should also stand. Instead, it is time to stand up and stand in solidarity with the undocumented people who live in fear of being separated from their families every day. Scriptures call us to care for the widow and the orphan, but it is time that we act sooner and prevent the creation of widows and orphans through our broken immigration system. I have witnessed many instances on the recent time. And like I say, this document was created 4 years ago, and it's so true today. We are at that point where the broken system is creating widows and orphans. We work very closely with the rural communities on Southwest Kansas. And one of our youth leaders was doing a fundraise for a family on Christmas. And the reason was she was doing a survey and she found out that that family had just lost the breadwinner of the family due to a deportation and him trying to come back to his kids. He got killed in the border. Never made it here. So he was just one more number on the books of the deportees on our government as a success story. But we end up with a family with kids and a widow, so orphans and a widow. So this youth leader was doing a fundraise to ensure that the family had food and at least a Christmas tree and a few gifts under the tree, knowing that she could never fill in the hole and the pain and the ache that this family was living and going through during the holidays. And that is just one of many stories. So the system is broken, and just activists like myself, we are fighting with everything we have within the law or challenging the law. If the law is still created with the intention to create a second-class citizens, it is our duty to challenge and change those laws. But in the meantime, lives are being lost, families are being torn apart, and that is where we need the support of our faith community to help us to stay in those families and alleviate their pain as much as we can, while the rest are continuing to fight, or we together fight these laws that are unjust. I would like to pause here and see if there is any questions about what we have talked so far. No? Okay. So who are those that are seeking sanctuary? There is a system to, I hate the word, but it's like a triage or filtering. Who can seek sanctuary? I wish we can say that any immigrant that is at risk or being targeted can be entitled or eligible to be sanctuary protected. But we have to be real, and we know that there is many of us, human beings, that have made mistakes in the past that will be crucified if those mistakes become public. The immigrant community is not just asked to be human, they've been asked to be almost saints. They cannot make a single mistake because the consequences are life-threatening, per se, because it ends up on deportation on many cases. So the triage process for the cases that an attorney can review the packet and say, okay, this case has a chance to be closed under any means that the attorney decides that are available, any means or venue that he can or she can fight with the support of the activist groups. Recently, I was seeing on YouTube, one of the youth, we have been doing the Know Your Rights trainings to empower the community to be able to stand up and protect their human rights and to understand a little bit of our system here in the United States, where if a police knock at your door, you have the right to ask for a judge order to enter that private property or to do a search or an arrest. So this youth was at a workplace and I show up with the intention of doing an arrest or a raid. And the youth was a DACA beneficiary, so he had been involved with activists and had learned a little bit about the rights and the proper way of doing things, what to expect. So he told them, yes, sure, I will let you in. Can you show me the judge order? And they could not provide any of that. So he was looking for the signature of a judge saying that they had the authorization to enter and read the place. So I couldn't provide that. So he denied them the entrance. Of course, the entities are used to people exercising their rights or to go, they have unlimited authority, unlike any other of our government institutions. So he stood by his right and didn't allow entrance. So I even threatened him and say, well, we're going to stay outside and we're going to sit there 24 hours, and when they come out, we're going to take them. So what he did, he called an organization, an activist organization, and say, hey, this is going on. You told me that this is what the law say they need to have in order to enter here, and that I have the right to ask for it. But now they're sitting outside, and this is what they're telling me. So the organization sent a rapid response team of community members to be present and to document, not to intervene, not to enter into an interaction or interfere with ICE, only to document. If ICE is there and is doing its job according to the guidelines of the law, then so be it. It's going to break our families, but it's our job to change that law that they are enforcing. As long as they do it with respect for the lives and the integrity and dignity of the people that they are arresting. So the community arrived to document, and an attorney was placed on a call with the youth to guide what to say, what not to say, what are the limits of your rights, how much can you stand up to ground, and what was the proper process. So the attorney was already getting information, giving information through a line. All of these would not be possible if this youth would not be trained on his rights, but also if a community emergency system or emergency plan wasn't in place already. So that is my dream, and that is my hope, that between Wichita, Newton, Garden City, Liberal, Dutch, we can all put together systems that are there to, I will say protect, but also to document and to empower the immigrants to exercise, to learn and exercise their rights, and also do our part. So that, if we can go to the next bullet. So how the sanctuary gets declared or not. There is a legal question there, and I believe we have an attorney online that may answer this or address this a little bit better. But it's our understanding that there is a law that punishes people that hide, harbor an undocumented immigrant. So the way that sanctuary churches has tackled that point is not hiding, not giving sanctuary in secrecy. Quite opposite. They declare that this church has made the decisions to stand by their faith guidance, and that are going to open their doors for the persecuted and for these families while their case is presented and litigated in the courts or by the law. So a press conference gets done and announces who the individual is that is entering into sanctuary. So the government will know, and there is no law that says that immigration agents cannot enter the sanctity of a church. I was here before and I mentioned we have relied on the moral values of our country and our government to respect the sanctity of a church. So that has been true before and is true today. Our president has come out forward and said that he will respect hospitals, churches. There is one more, schools. So those are the three places that he has said that he will respect and his agents will respect. We have seen recently a case of an 11-year-old girl that was deemed undocumented on her way to the hospital with her parents. And agents followed her, followed the ambulance, stayed by her room, guard the surgery room and get her in custody after the surgery was done. That was a hospital. So there is always those cases that they may do the opposite of what they say, but that's when our job becomes more important to highlight that they are not doing as they promised. So yes, the church will be the part that is going to be providing the needs of the person in sanctuary. The community organizations and community at large will be the ones providing surveillance per se. And there is a lot that entails in the sanctuary, from having a small area where a person can leave, a shower where they can shower, and a means to have food. There is a lot of work. That's where the community will come and the volunteers. One person has to be in the church with the undocumented family at all times. And that is in case an immigration agent knocks at the door, that the undocumented person is not the one opening the door, because then that is giving them the legal authority information to enter and get them arrested. So there is also keeping them sane. They will be prisoners of a more welcoming and warm place than a jail cell while they fight their case, but still they will not be allowed to be out in the community. So that's a little bit about the living arrangements. You can pass that. And I will be more than happy to stay after and address a little bit more the details of sanctuary. So like I mentioned, the families in sanctuary will need a lot of support, not only of the faith community, but the community at large. So they can stay with their minds clear. They will be still separated from their families, but their families at least will be able to visit them while they're on sanctuary. Any questions so far?
Well, it's just a simple question of, in your document here, it says, the undocumented that have lived here for some time qualify for sanctuary. What is some time? 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? Wow.
So the people that qualify for sanctuary, it will be defined by the attorney reviewing each particular case. Because it may be a case that a family has been here 25 years per se, but on their youth, they had a DUI per se. So that case will be very, very, very difficult for an attorney to fight. So maybe the attorney will say, let's fight all we have on the legal side with the community, but without the sanctuary. So the cases that will come to sanctuary will be triaged by a legal team. Sunflower has a team of 3 attorneys that have signed agreements to help us navigate and do the triage. A group of volunteers will be needed to help us put together everything that an attorney will scan to decide who is a good candidate. So we will bring into sanctuary only the cases that are perceived of having a good possibility of being stopped from deportation. There is going to be cases that breaks our hearts, but according to the current laws, there is no way that an attorney or a community mobilization will stop their deportation proceedings. Then we will condemn those, we will talk about those, we will fight within the law, providing legal assistance, but those are not the good cases for sanctuary. So churches have been sanctuary for years, and they may have had a couple of cases or 3 cases. So sanctuary is not the first step. That is the last step when all means have been exhausted, and that person is facing an imminent deportation, but we know that there is a clean record, that they have families, that they have been here for a long time, 10, 15 more years. Then those are the ones that we will try to bring in and fight with everything and anything. I don't know if I'm on time.
Barb has the mic, and we want Michael to be able to hear what we say, so wait for the mic and ask your questions then, and then Lupe can come up here and answer. Are there other people that have questions right now? This is the time, because she's here.
Where that they were separated and there were the 4 kids and they were standing at the door and the 12-year-old wasn't letting them in.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I call it a scare because we did not have to do the sanctuary. We had the intervention of an attorney that is well known. I won't say the name because he's a political candidate, but he was able to provide pro bono, timely intervention and get the mother out with the bond. So we didn't have to go through bringing the kids in and filing all the paperwork and getting into the sanctuary, but we were.
Michael, can you hear me?
So they're fighting their case as it is now with her with a bond.
Are you hearing the questions?
Some, not so much.
Someone being with the family 24 hours. What if someone needs to leave or is not here? Why not just not answer the door? Someone knocks on the church locked.
The reason why they do that is when a family is in sanctuary, you kind of your adrenaline and your confidence gets back, and they won't think. They will maybe believe that it's a church member or somebody else that needs in the church. So to avoid those situations, that's why this kind of a rule or need has been created. But I have some YouTube videos, I don't know if we will have time, from Rosa Robles, was in sanctuary for over a year in Tucson, Arizona. And she talks on this video a little bit about from her detention to her taking sanctuary. I had the opportunity and the blessing to go visit her in Tucson at her church. And it is an inspirational experience that brings the community together on a ways and a level that probably any tragedy is the only thing that can bring us together at that human level without looking at our skin, at our intellectual, at our economy, or any other dividers per se. She was there. There was teams of people coming to spend bits and pieces of time with her to pray, to sing, cook. Churches normally do fundraising, so she will be part of the cooking of the food in the church and being integrated on that part, showing that she was able to contribute and to give back to the church and brought the immigrant community and the church was like this church majority white people. It was amazing to see the integration at a very deep level.
What kind of threats personally have you faced in this work?
Oh, my current address is not on my driver license. I hope that answers.
Yes, I assume from what you're saying that what needs to happen should Shalom become a sanctuary church, that it will be our responsibility to mobilize the community around. Is that correct? Like, because I can't imagine that our little congregation could do this all on our own.
I will say it will be our responsibility. So it will be a team. We will go back to the 8 components. So Shalom will be the one providing that piece of the sanctuary. Then the rest of those groups that you saw are part of the session and the rapid response team. but not necessarily Shalom. So it will be all these other committees, they all had a role. One will be the one in charge of making sure that there is food. The other group will be in charge of the mental health, providing activities and coordinating. What Shalom will do, will have to have one person that will be coordinating. So you will be talking to Sunflower to see what is happening on the organizing piece, on the public shining of the issue. It will be talking to this other church to coordinate volunteers to come and spend time with the family, whose turn to cook, who's gonna be bringing. So Shalom will provide the physical and will provide a coordinator, and Shalom members will be part of those teams also, who is going to be spending a night with the family, not necessarily only Shalom. So that's when the community gets engaged and bring together. If Shalom decide, no, we are not going to be spending the night, we're going to be here with them, praying, singing, doing activities, crafts, whatever, until 9. And then from 9 on, they will be notified that nobody will be coming to the door. Nobody is expected. And those are decisions that are to be discussed and made by Shalom in a community. We will be more than happy to work together. So think of Shalom as one piece of the puzzle with a specific mission and responsibilities among the big picture. Not everything will be for Shalom, but it will be communicated, and I see it as a puzzle. Did that answer? Okay. Last questions?
It sounds like this is an overwhelming responsibility to provide someone here all the time. Now, you mentioned food. I assume someone would have to purchase food. Does it have to be prepared, or can the family?
It depends. I have seen several, I was researching last night, several cases and how it has been done in different states and different churches. There is some churches that do have a kitchen. Most of the churches, I will say. So the family only need groceries. They cook their own food, they help cleaning and maintaining the church to keep them busy and sane. There have been other smaller churches where they do not have the capacity of a kitchen. So they coordinate community members to be in charge of morning wrapping food. Anybody can have a microwave. Believe me, these families are not looking for comfort or looking for commodities. They're just looking for a safe place.
You mentioned somebody living in Tucson for a year. Is there any other limit as far as the amount of time somebody's been?
That has been the longest person in sanctuary, and many in Tucson were in and out. We as activists were assuming that they were trying to make an example out of that case. After a year of community fighting for the safety of this family and not dropping the case, not giving up. Rosa Robles was granted the stay, and she is happily fighting for others along her family. One more question?
A simple question. So during the week, we have our doors locked and someone's answering the door. Are there things, or what are our rights, or how would we stand up for someone when our doors are open? Say during worship or Wednesday nights, you guys have the right to walk into our doors, and what steps can we take then to protect someone we're providing sanctuary for?
Good question. So after the decision gets made, I would like to see a small committee meeting to go over training and what are the logistical issues and how other churches had tackled those questions. Normally, they will identify, they know their parishioners, they will identify a person, but ICE will normally will have to check in with the person that is welcoming, that it is never said that they can address civilian and come and scoop the place. We have not seen that happen. But again, it takes me to the example that I gave earlier about the youth on the workplace, where he identified ICE. It was like, do you have a warrant? Now let's say that they show up and they do have a warrant for the arrest and a judge ordered to enter and search the church premises. There is nothing we can do about that. The only thing that we will be able to do is to make sure that it's done according to the law, again, with respect to the humanity and dignity of the person in sanctuary. And then the other team will be activated. The media, the one has been coordinating the press conferences, it will be immediately a press conference and a public light shining on the breakage of the promise of the 3 places that have been mentioned that will be respected. I feel that the church, and this is just me, I'm a person of faith, I see the building as the home of our Lord, not as any building, and I see it as the sanctity of his home. If they decide to do something like that, it will be up to the community organizations to bring the light and make sure that our nation knows to what extremes are we going through as a nation. To deport a family that, assuming if it's in sanctuary, has no criminal records, has no issues, their only crime has been to migrate to this beautiful country, to save their lives and to seek a better future. Thank you. I'm sorry, time flies.
Yeah. She'll be around, so you can approach her later and ask questions, and we'll try and get those out and about so other people get to hear the answers too. So I just want to thank Lupe for your faith, your passion, your energy for this, and also for your invitation to this. So, okay, now we're ready for Michael. And do we have to do anything or?
To get the technical.
Okay, a 2-minute break to get
Michael, you're going on the screen.
set up. So get some coffee, go to the bathroom, and Michael will be with you in 2 minutes.
Oh, there we go. Go away. Right now? Check. Michael, can you hear Michael, can you hear me?
I can.
You can hear me, okay.
Yep.
You can still hear me right now? Check 1, 2, 3.
Can.
Okay. Now let's pull his up slowly. Okay, go ahead and give us a test.
1, 2, 3. Oh. You're getting a little bit of harmonic feedback.
keep talking, keep testing.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, Michael, you are on the screen and you're going to stay on the screen. So just so you're aware.
Okay, I'll be good.
Okay, folks, can we, in the interest of time, can we bring it back into the sanctuary? Can you come back in? We want to get.
Can you come back in? We want to get started.
We're kind of crunched for time.
Are kind of crunched for time here, and we don't want to.
Okay.
Do we need to do anything but just turn it over, Michael, to you?
I think that's all you have to do.
Okay. We're
going to just turn it over to you, and thanks for being with us.
Not at all. Well, good morning, and thanks for allowing me to speak. I hate to be the Debbie Downer of all this, but talking about the law kind of makes me the Debbie Downer. So let's start with the statute, which is where we've got to begin most any discussion. So the statute is 8 U.S. 1324 A III. There's not going to be a test, so don't write it down. Well, the important parts are that it provides a criminal penalty for anyone who knowingly or in reckless disregard harbors or conceals someone who has come to, entered, or remains in the United States in violation of law. So I know that there was a great deal of talk about a team of attorneys who pick and choose clients to house in sanctuary, and that's all part of Sunflower. The question is going to be for the Shalom as a client is whether or not you're in violation of those elements. Clearly, if you bring someone in and they are seeking sanctuary, you're going to know, or you're going to recklessly disregard their status. The greater question is going to be, they've come to, entered, or remain in violation of law. If there's an active immigration case, are they remaining in violation of law? Now, this entire discussion is theoretical in the sense that I don't know that even under the current administration, they would pick a small church in the middle of Kansas to single out for prosecuting the sanctuary problem. That being said, I can't rule that out. So the questions that were posed to me or to us were about the tax exemption, who's at risk, and then when is sanctuary no longer needed? As you're probably aware, the tax exemption risk or you're engaged in a partisan political process. Now, unless you equip all your sanctuary residents with t-shirts that say "Down with Trump" or "End Sessions," you probably aren't going to cross over into a partisan political process. And so the simple violation of law or engaging in the sanctuary process does not put your 501c3 at risk. When is sanctuary no longer needed? That's kind of an amorphous question that would be case dependent. Are they seeking sanctuary because they can't go to their home? Because ICE is looking for them, but they have a case. And what they need is a motion to reopen their case. And once that's reopened, then they're protected from being removed. So is it a temporary sanctuary? Are they someone who has exhausted all their remedies and now is just trying to find a loophole through publicity to find an order of supervision or negotiate something in the eye of the media? That may be longer. So the question of when is it no longer needed is kind of a decision that's made by if Sunflower is helping you organize between those advisors and the church and the people that are seeking sanctuary. The final piece that you asked me was who's at risk, and that's a little broader question. So let me give you an analogy. Some of the prosecutions that we have seen under 8 U.S.C. 1324 involve employment and employers who are hiring undocumented workers and using them in their particular fields, whether it's fencing or pallet making or a Chinese restaurant. And in those particular prosecutions, the U.S. Attorney's Office looked for something other than just mere employment. A restaurant that has 5 undocumented workers isn't going to be singled out for prosecution. However, a restaurant who has 5 undocumented workers and provides them a place to live and transportation to and from the place of employment, they may be singled out for prosecution because it has that extra factor. And so then who gets prosecuted? The owners of the restaurant, the managers, the people involved in the transportation. In some cases, straw companies were established to pay the undocumented workers. So those folks who handled the money. So how does that translate to the structure of the church? Depends on what you create as your team one or your this team and that team. The pastor is the CEO and ultimately responsible for the conduct within the 4 walls, would be the argument. And then anybody else that was particularly or directly involved in providing that sanctuary. If one of the parishioners made a meal, are they going to be on the hook? Probably not. Is someone is continually responsible for taking care of that person or acting as an intermediary or doing something else to make their stay there? Maybe, depending on that level of involvement. So the issue is the sanctuary movement is a place that our firm doesn't usually find itself because you are outside the boundaries of the law. And I don't say that to be critical, but we do a lot of in-court litigation. For those of you who don't know what we do, we are a removal defense firm that's been operating in Kansas City since 2003. We defend non-citizens in direct removal proceedings, which is the immigration court in Kansas City. That court serves all of Kansas and all of Missouri. For the last 5 years, we've run a nonprofit also out of our office because there is no representation for non-citizens unless they hire it. And so there's no public attorney or public defense service. So you have to have nonprofits to do that who either provide pro bono or a low bono service. Well, there are no pro bono or low bono services west of Springfield, Missouri. They're all based in St. Louis, at least they were until 2012. So we began one in Kansas City, and we represent people on both sides of the border, more from Kansas than Missouri, because there simply are none in this area. So we spend a lot of time in court. We spend a lot of time in courts of appeal and in the circuit courts. So we tend to reserve our activities for those legal arguments. And that's why I say when we're talking about the elements of the statute that are at play, the question is remaining in violation of law. If you've got somebody that's been here for more than 10 years and they're picked up by ICE, they may have an application to remain or at least contest their removability in front of an immigration judge. And once that application is filed, that person, not the family, but that person is now in status and is not in violation of law while they fight their case. But if that's the case, they have work authorization. The question would be then, why does that person need sanctuary? So we kind of run ourselves into a circular issue to say, only the people that don't have an application would be seeking your services or your sanctuary. And those are the ones that could put you in theory at risk. From a practical enforcement standpoint, as I said, a small church in the middle of Kansas is probably not going to be the target. Given the agency and the administration's ire over sanctuary states, they'd probably, if they were going to begin to target sanctuary churches, they would begin in a sanctuary state. As to the efficacy of enforcement at sensitive locations, despite the president's removal of all memorandum upon his inauguration, ICE maintains that their sensitive location memo is still enforced, meaning they will not take enforcement action in a church, a school, medical facility, or at a public demonstration. We have seen that immediately following the removal of the memorandum, ICE did make an operation at a school up here in the Kansas City area. They've deflected that by saying that local law enforcement was the person or the personnel who went to that school, but they were at the direction of ICE. So following that one incident and that we'd received word that they were going to conduct operations at churches about that same time. And so an operation of the Hispanic Chamber and several churches and defense attorneys of criminal and immigration and other community action groups came together on a Sunday and patrolled all the churches in the area, and ICE never showed up. Now, were they ever going to? We'll never know. They deny that they did, but the information was relatively strong. So it seems to be that they're back to obeying the sensitive locations. So the idea that they're going to come knocking on your church door seems far-fetched. As to their ability to enter, they don't. You can ask them not to enter your church. You can ask them to not come in, and you can bar them from entry. If they obtain a search warrant for the person that they're looking for from a magistrate, then they have the right to enter. Don't be fooled, ICE can create a warrant of arrest, but that's a document they print off their own desktop printer. And as far as its efficacy to allow them into a building to arrest someone, I don't think it holds water. And they haven't tried, they use it as an argument, but they haven't effectively used it as a device to get into a church or another building to arrest someone. So I think from that regard, you would be relatively safe. But I reiterate the caveat that in this day and age with this administration and the changes that are coming, I don't know what safe means at this point. So that's a decision that you all have to take under your own. The other part of that is there was a lot of discussion of the process and the ebb and flow of removal proceedings and how people are picked up. So if I can take just a moment and kind of give you an overview of this system and how things work, maybe that will help. Understand that when we talk about removal proceedings and we talk about immigrants being picked up by ICE for an immigration violation, for the most part, what we're talking about is the enforcement of a federal civil statute. So to make a parallel, the agency of the county or the city who comes and tells you that your siding is falling off your house or your gutters are hanging down or your grass is too tall, is a local civil administrative body. It's the code enforcement officer. So you can think of immigration in the context of arresting non-citizens for violations of immigration law as a federal civil code enforcement. That leads to a number of quandaries about whether or not law enforcement can hold them for immigration violations, et cetera. But the idea is then where does this code enforcement, so to speak, get processed? There is an immigration judge or 3 immigration judges in Kansas City, and they have authority only over non-citizens charged with these civil violations. If the immigrant is charged with a criminal violation of the immigration law, and there are a few, then that goes to a federal district court, not to an immigration court. The immigration judges have a docket that is either someone who is detained and may be eligible for bond and may not, and they have a non-detained docket. So for those folks that are on a non-detained docket, meaning they've paid a bond or they never had a bond, and they're coming and going to see the immigration judge, if they have a colorable claim, a claim that they can say, we want to assert this and remain in the United States, those dockets, those abilities for hearing are about 2.5 years out before you have a trial. So you would have a couple of preliminary docket call hearings called master calendar hearings. And then once it's set that you're going to have a trial, that trial would be set on a schedule that would likely be about 2 years from now, maybe almost 3, depending on the fluctuation of each court's calendar. So that's that process. And if they're successful, they may or may not have work authorization pending while they wait. Applications that can be brought before an immigration judge include an asylum claim, include what's known as cancellation of removal, could include the ability to adjust your status based on a marriage or a relationship with someone who has status in the United States. It could also involve a legal argument as to whether or not they are truly removable from the United States. This typically involves someone who already has status, has been convicted of a crime, and then the argument is whether or not that crime actually creates a violation of the immigration laws and makes them removable or causes them to be removed from the United States. A loss at the immigration court level is an appeal towards the Board of Immigration Appeals. During that appeal period, which is about 12 to 18 months, the person's removal is automatically stayed, meaning they are allowed to remain in the United States without fear of removal at that point. A third level of appeal can go to a federal appeals court, the circuit courts of appeal of the United States. The states of the United States is broken up into clusters of conjoined states. So Kansas is in the 10th Circuit, Missouri is in the 8th Circuit, and all federal appeals are directed to those circuited appeals courts. For our courts of appeal, we go to the 8th Circuit because the immigration court is in Missouri, and the rules dictate that the circuit court is where the judge sits. The problem is that the 8th Circuit is the most conservative circuit for immigration cases in the United States. They have a very low grant rate, and they're very tolerant of government action. So it's not a very friendly forum to venture to. But those can stretch another year, but you don't necessarily have an automatic stay there. And so remaining in the United States may be a question at that point. And that may be another candidate for someone who's seeking sanctuary, is someone who does not have a stay. So ICE is seeking to actively remove them based on the underlying orders that came from the immigration judge and the board, but yet they still have an appeal pending at this circuit court. So that's kind of the landscape. The different twists and turns to that are myriad and are usually fact-based. I believe that Lupe was mentioning that no driver's license is something that's arrestable. Not having a valid driver's license is a misdemeanor in the state of Kansas. It has been. It is an arrestable offense. The greater problem with it is now that even if you aren't arrested, if you're simply given a ticket, if you go and plead guilty to that, the statute requires that your fingerprints are taken. It makes sense because if you don't have a driver's license, you don't necessarily have a valid identification, and the idea is that the fingerprints are used to identify you. Under President Obama, a program called Secure Communities was created. And what Secure Communities in the barest sense did was take that fingerprint data that was collected at a local jail, which is then channeled through an automated fingerprint identification system, AFIS, to the FBI. Another channel was created, and that information was then shunted to Department of Homeland Security for them to make an analysis of that person. So what occurs, and has occurred here in the Kansas City area, is someone receives a ticket for no driver's license. They go plead guilty, they pay their fine, and they get their fingerprints taken. So those fingerprints are then shunted to Department of Homeland Security, who figures out they had a contact at the border 15 years ago. It didn't result in a removal order. They haven't been deported. They just got caught and released at the border 15 years ago. Well, now they're a target for immigration. So now an ICE agent, based on the information from the ticket, is going to go to that house and attempt to pick them up. And so now that person is being hunted by ICE, who's literally sitting outside their house waiting to take them into custody. Now, their bond may be low. They may get out with no bond. Most of them are seeing a bond of between $3,000 and $4,000. And they're taken into custody and then put into the system to see an immigration judge and explore their relief. But that's the lowest level of criminal activity, quote, criminal activity, that can get you placed into the crosshairs of immigration. And it's not really the ticket that did it. It was the fact that there was contact with immigration 15 years ago. So that's the reality of enforcement at its most simple level that's going on here in Kansas and Missouri. I think from that, I leave the floor open to questions. And if there's anything that I need to clarify, please let me know.
Thank you, Michael. That's a lot to process and take in, but let's start with questions.
I've stunned everyone into silence.
Or are you guys in shock? Yes. Yes, here's, would you raise your hand again? Yeah.
I would just remind you that in order for Michael to see you, you need to go up to the mic. So if you would like him to see you, go up to the mic. All right.
People are hesitant to be seen by you, but we'll...
I'm hesitant to be seen by everyone else, so I understand.
I'd have to get my cane to walk up there. I have heard that in order to bond out a jail, that when it involves immigration, that in Kansas we're used to paying like 10%, but with immigration type issues, they have to come up with the entire amount. So if it's a $4,000 bond, they have to come up with $4,000.
Can you hear that?
Yeah, and you don't have to. Immigration bonds are at a higher risk than the traffic ticket bond. So the typical bonding amount, if you use a bondsman for immigration purposes, is 15%. But they tend to call that an insurance policy. And I've seen some bonding companies who come back a year later and go, time to pay your insurance policy again. And so it can be an expensive proposition to use a bonding company. Our recommendation in our office is if you can pay the cash bond, pay the cash bond. Part of the rationale is that you earn, I don't know, it's the treasury note percentage. So that's what, 0.0001, I don't know. But you at least earn a little money on that money that you've paid towards the bond. The greater risk is that the bonding contract with immigration is very broad. It basically says if we tell you to show up, you show up. If you miss a single notice, remember the notices will go to the person who paid the bond, not the person who was bonded out. So if you have a friend bonding you out and your friend lives somewhere else, or you move away, or you get mad at each other, then your friend doesn't tell you that you were supposed to show up and your money's gone. The other problem is that when it's time to get the money back, your friend gets notified. And I can't tell you how many times friends have enriched themselves on other friends by going, oh, I didn't get the bond money back, when they clearly did. But it can be, you can use a bonding company. it's a little more money.
Follow up to that question is I understand in Wichita that bond companies are not interested in this business because of the high risk nature, but I don't have, fortunately, firsthand knowledge of that one way or the other.
Most local bonding companies aren't interested in it. There are a few national bonding companies. One actually has the name National Bonding Company. The other one is Gonzalez and Gonzalez, are two of the main immigration bonding companies. And they will bond anybody, anywhere. I noticed in the most recent Christmas card that I got from Gonzalez and Gonzalez, they actually have a 913 or a Kansas City area, Kansas area code to call. So if someone in Wichita wants to use one of those national or nationwide bonding companies, they can. They don't have to use a local bonding company. But yes, the local man on the street bonding company, they don't like these bonds.
Rachel has a question. You want to come up here?
Mainly because I've been emailing Michael. Hi, I am Rachel, one of the pastors here. My question is, for a church considering this idea of being a location of sanctuary, would you recommend us as a church or as a leadership board, I'm not sure, to have some sort of legal representation at the ready? Like, how urgent would that be for us?
I think you would want some form of legal representation at the ready. So if you, let's give an example. You make the decision, you agree, you have a family that's living in one of the spare rooms of the church, and you get that knock at the door, and you're faced with 3 ICE agents and 2 in vans waiting, and they say, we want to take those people into custody. Your inclination and what I've told you to do is say, well, have a nice day. You're not coming into my church right now. And they say, well, as the example was given, we're going to sit outside and we're going to wait. You're going to start fretting, as is everyone else. You're going to want somebody that knows what you've done, knows the ins and outs of federal law enforcement practice, what those limitations are and what they're not. If they show you a warrant that says warrant at the top and immigration, I can give you a copy of that, it's basically worthless. It's an administrative civil warrant that doesn't give them permission to come into your building because it's not a criminal warrant that's been examined by a neutral, detached magistrate, etc. The second piece is you're going to want to talk to a criminal defense attorney. Are you on the hook because you're one of the pastors? Is someone who said, I'm going to make sure that they have a fresh breakfast every morning and comes in every morning and cleans and takes care of the bed linens, are they on the hook? You're probably going to want to sit down with a competent criminal attorney who both has a deep agency knowledge in the sense that they understand how federal law enforcement agencies work and federal criminal practice. To just, if nothing else, have consulted with them and have a number to dial.
Other questions?
You were talking about the 2.5 to 3 year wait when a person is waiting for their case to be heard. What is the status of those people during that time? Are they incarcerated? Are they free to go about their business?
It depends. They can be incarcerated. There's a statute. So we've talked about the civil immigration practice. The simple act of being in the United States without permission is enough to put you in removal proceedings. So, but it's not enough to have you mandatorily detained. What arises for detention is a culmination of 2 factors. Anytime you are looking at a bond issue, whether it's in a criminal court or in an immigration court, the same 2 factors are at play: dangerousness and flight risk. So dangerousness is what is the crime you've been convicted of? Because in immigration, I don't care what you did, meaning I don't care what the police report says. I care what you were convicted of, because immigration consequences, 99% of the time, flow from a conviction, not an accusation. You've got to have been convicted of a crime, and not all crimes. Oddly enough, a DUI is not has no direct immigration consequence. And most people think it does, and it doesn't. So the nuance of determining what has a criminal consequence or what crimes have an immigration consequence is a practice unto itself. Having said that, there are some categories of crimes that make people mandatorily detainable, meaning the judge doesn't have jurisdiction over bond, and immigration's enforcement agency could let them out if they want to, but they usually don't. So that person, if they have the ability to seek relief, is going to remain detained, and they're going to be on an accelerated docket, but they may still be in custody for 6 months while we process that case as fast as we can. And if we lose, we take an appeal that's going to be another 4 to 6 months. So they're in jail at least a year. If there's a circuit appeal of that, they may be in jail longer than that. We have one gentleman who is fighting a case who's cresting over 2 years in custody because of the unique nature of his case, but he's not bondable and he remains in custody because of his criminal history. But yet he can't be removed because of the nature of the relief that we've created for him. So he's frustrated, as are we, but that's the nature of this practice. For the most part, people who are seeking to fix their status are out of custody. And for the 2.5 to 3 year process, they're usually out of custody for that amount of time. Their status is that they have an application pending. So they are lawfully present in the United States. They may or may not have lawful status because their status hasn't been granted yet, but they are lawfully present in the United States. And if we've done it right, or timing has hit correctly, they have work authorization. So they have a card that lets them work anywhere in the United States. That allows them to get a social security number and a driver's license. So frequently for those 2.5 to 3 years, their life's pretty calm.
Other questions? Well, it looks like either we are overwhelmed by what Michael said, or we've come to the end of this. So anything more for Michael? I'll just say, yes, Lupe.
Hi, Michael.
Hey, Lupe, how are you?
Oh, doing good. I have a question.
Sure.
When you're giving an example of who can be prosecuted or charged, and you give an example of an employer that has 3 or 4 undocumented workers, but also provides a place to live or to sleep, and transports them from and to work and home, that the Department of Labor could prosecute them. But isn't it that prosecution for human trafficking? Because most of those cases, they're under the, those undocumented immigrants are not free to make decisions to go work somewhere else for whatever reasons. And that is a little bit different than when an immigrant is voluntarily coming into a church to take sanctuary or protection while the community fights the state, or the legal attorney fights the state. So that's kind of part one. I was trying to make the connection on my head, and maybe you can help me so the church understand that example that you lay out. And my other question is there any records of any church that has, we know there is many churches in different states that are already sanctuary, and that not only ready to do sanctuary, but also have done it. Is there any record of any church that had faced any criminal consequences for doing this sanctuary? And also, when you mentioned statue, the way that the activists are playing a role in protecting the sanctuary church, it's by not hiding the immigrant, because I believe the statute, and you read it, says like hiding in harboring undocumented immigrant. And that is the reason why it's always so important to make it publicly known that a church had decided and is bringing somebody. And it's normally, the press conference is normally put together by the activist organization, and the church role is only to speak. This is what we as a church are doing. If you can, I know it's a lot.
No. Let's break it back. Let's start with the statute. So the statute is, again, 8 USC 1324. It's actually entitled Bringing in and Harboring Certain Aliens. So 1324A1AI is the attempt to bring them into the United States. II is in knowing or in reckless disregard of the fact that you transport, move, or attempt to transport the alien within the United States. And 3 is the one that I've seized on for your purposes, which is in knowing or reckless disregard of the fact that an alien has come to, entered, or remains in the United States in violation of law, conceals, harbors, or shields from detection, or attempts to conceal, harbor, or shield from detection such alien in any place. And I understand that the idea of the sanctuary movement is that if we make a public announcement about it, then we haven't concealed them or shield them from detection. But harbor, the phrase harbor, doesn't have such a concealment element to it. And so if they wanted to, that would be where they would go. The second point you made is, has anybody ever been prosecuted for this? And the answer is I couldn't find it, and I don't believe there has been. So my purpose is not to say, holy cow, you're going to all be arrested immediately by the black helicopter team that came in and swept through Postville and took 400 people into custody. That's not it. But the issue is are you at risk? Well, yes, by the statute, by the plain language of the statute, you could be. Is it enough to dissuade you? Given the fact that you're in a deep red state, you're one small church, you may or may not do this 1 or 2 or 3 times, depending on how cumbersome it becomes personally to you. Probably not at risk. So the risk factor is low, but is there a risk? Sure. Somebody just died from the flesh-eating disease from eating raw oysters. Okay, does that mean everybody has to stop eating raw oysters? No. Is there now a risk that you could die horribly from eating raw oysters? Apparently so. Who the hell thought of that? But by the same token, I deal with the law, and you asked me to make an analysis, so that's the analysis. The final piece is that some of these prosecutions, when you talk to the U.S. attorney, that is exactly their position, which is to say the employer made it difficult for them to leave, the wage was good, they threatened them, they did all these things. But I interview the employees because I'm the guy everybody turns to say, what relief do they have? And in fact, the government may offer them T visas, which don't necessarily fit, but if they're going to give it to them, more power to them. In that sense, the employees didn't really worry about having to leave. They had good money coming in. It was a steady job, and it gave them a place to stay. So remember, most of the workers that you're dealing with that don't have a large family are coming here to find a way to make as much money with as little expense as possible, because they're counting on an exchange rate to send it back home to wherever home is. They're reverting those dollars back to wherever they came from to support a family that's outside the United States. So the least expense they have here is better for them. So yeah, in some of those conditions, are they being underpaid and overcharged for rent and what? Yes, absolutely. But by the letter of the law, would you be harboring someone? The answer to that is yes. So I think I covered your points.
Thanks, Michael and Lupe. I'm guessing that puts an end to the questions right now. What we invite you to do is, at least with Lupe, who's on site, when this is through, you can continue to ask her questions. And what we're asking of you, when you came in, there were paper and pens. If you have a question you think it is important or imperative that we discuss at tomorrow's meeting, please put that on a sheet of paper and put it in the basket, because immediately after this meeting, we'll be putting that together for tomorrow's meeting. So if you would like us as a congregation to discuss something, put it on a question and in the basket. And again, this is an important time for all undocumented people. It's an important time for those of us who are concerned about them and their plight, and for ourselves and our relationships and our faith. And we are indebted to Lupe and Michael for helping us think through this. So thanks very much.
Not at all. And if you've got questions or other folks have questions that they think of later, please send me an email and I'll be glad to get you those answers as fast as possible.
Okay, we will do that. And thanks for that offer. Thank you.
Not at all.
All right. And thank all of you who took the time on a Saturday morning to come and think about this with us. Melanie, yes. Okay. Yeah, we can send it out to everyone. So check your email for that document then. Okay. All right. Do we want to close with prayer or do you? Okay. All right.
One more piece of information. When Rachel asked the question about having legal support per se before, that is absolutely, as our attorney mentioned, that is a good thing to do. The good thing about this whole structure is that Sunflower being part of national organizations, there is already attorneys that are part of the movement that are willing and ready to jump in and support if needed. Sunflower has a local network of 3 attorneys that provide trainings and address questions as our attorney from Kansas City did today, and also help us educate not only the immigrant community how to prepare, but the supporters and how to get ready and know how to act. But there is legal representation ready at a local level for the immigrants, for the supporters, and at a national level for if, like our attorneys say, there is always risk in surgery, right? Even like he said, small things, maybe a tooth, something. So we do have national legal support and state, local legal support also.
All right, a blessing for us that comes from Micah 6:8. The Lord has told you what is required. Do not back away from the challenges before you today, but go from this place with joy, doing justice, loving mercy, and walking humbly. The God of grace will go with you. Amen. Thank you all. Go in peace.